So when it comes to what main stat or cost you should run, I have made a very interesting discovery. So I'm getting all of my stats from Prido. So if they get something wrong, that's on them. But I wanted to point out like if you should run crit rate or crit damage on your main set. I've come to the conclusion crit rate is significantly better in basically any situation. And it comes down to crit rate and your crit damage. So if you don't know, your 5-star echoes will have a base rate of either 22 or 44 crit rate to crit damage. This suggests that we have a 1-to-2 ratio. This is in fact false. We do not actually want to run on Genshin Impact stats anymore. 1-to-2 ratio is dog shit. Because we already beat 1-to-2 ratio with basically base crit damage stats. So if you don't know, you start out with 150 base crit damage. That is a massive amount from Genshin Impact's 50. Basically, full build Genshin Impact teams will have around 200, maybe 250 crit damage, depending on if you have a crit damage weapon or not. At least from my free-to-play experience. And so, like, that's a good amount of crit damage. You're 50 off of that. You're 50 off of 200. You can get that from substats. That's fine. So it comes down to how much crit rate. They kept the crit rate the same. You only start out with 5. And your substat rolls are actually really, really low. So, for example, Genshin Impact, you can get up to like 22% crit rate. It doesn't happen often, but you can do it, right? You can have like your 15% crit rate pieces carry your crit rate stat all the way up to 50. So we have 5 pieces. So you have like your main set, and then you have your force. Like you have your 4 cost, you have 2 1 cost, 2 3 cost. So you have 5 pieces. They can all roll at least up to 10.5. What does that look like? So if you get all of your pieces to have maximum crit rate, you're going to be looking around 50%. It's going to be a little bit more than that, and then you have to put in the 5 from the original. So you're going to have around 55 crit rate, which like isn't actually that good. Generally, you'd want somewhere around 65 to 70 in order for that to be good crit rate ratios. And so without you're not going to roll max crit rate on every piece. So in order to make that up, you're going to want the crit rate main stat to give you the 22. And that's not just 22 crit rate, because that piece can also roll crit rate. So you can go up to like 30 crit rate from one piece on your character. And so you only need like 3 pieces to actually roll crit rate alongside so one piece could literally not roll crit rate at all, and it could still be good. So what you should be doing is looking for crit rate in your substats, and not fodder your crit damage pieces, because this is only from base. You can still get it from weapons and stuff, but we don't have enough weapons currently in the game that give crit rate as their substat. So, like, for example, Encore, she doesn't have a really good, outside of Battle Pass, like, she doesn't have a good crit rate option. I think Battle Pass Rectifier, I haven't looked at Battle Pass because I don't spend money on the game. But, basically, it's you spend money for a crit rate weapon, or you don't have a crit rate weapon. And so you should basically, every single free-to-play player should be just literally looking for this, and this only. Weapons, I'm going to guess, are going to have more than 44 crit damage subs. I could be wrong on that one. They could just only go up to 44. But even in that case, you should be looking for crit damage weapons and crit rate main sets, because the crit rate main set can roll crit rate, making the... Basically, what I'm trying to say is you want crit rate main stat. 9 out of 10 times, crit rate main stat is what you should be farming for. Do not feed EXP into your crit damage pieces, because you will not get a good enough crit damage piece especially in the early game, to justify it over a crit rate piece. You want a crit rate. You want the 22 crit rate. The 22 crit rate is so much more value for your characters than the crit damage piece. And it comes down to being and it really just comes down to you having a base crit damage of 150. To put that into perspective, you could have 60 crit rate, 0 crit damage rolls, and still have a better 1 to 2 ratio in the game. Like your 1 to 2 ratio, you would have it better. It would be better than 1 to 2 if you focused all of your substats onto crit rate and you had like 60. 0 crit damage roll. None of your pieces have it. You would still have, because it would be, you'd need 120 crit damage for that to be a 1 to 2 ratio, which is good. You have 150 base. It's so, crit rate main stat is so broken in this game, it's not even funny. The only time that you should even be looking at crit damage main set, so your full cost echo, is when you already have a crit damage on your weapon, and then it might skew, and obviously you get more damage out of getting more crit damage. But that really depends on how good your crit rate pieces are and like everything, right? Because so like even if you could get to like 50 crit rate comfortably, the 80 crit rate build might still outperform depending on, well, if you crit or not, right? And it might come out to be averaging about the same DPS anyways. So once you get into overworld farming your bosses, look for crit rate. I don't recommend foddering your crit damage pieces because, for example, Rover has a pretty good option in their 5-star, with the 5-star crit rate. Like, you could maybe conceivably, hypothetically run a crit damage main set for, like, Havoc Rover. But, like, Encore, for example, you need crit rate. So, when it comes to Relic EXP allocation, do not put any EXP into your crit damage pieces. They just won't be good enough.